All right, let's take a look at the brush tool. So with the brush tool, it's one of the most valuable tools you're going to use in Photoshop. It does lots and lots of things. So if we click on the brush tool, you can see that it actually shows you the size of the brush. If it's not doing that, what you can do is you can go to, depending on which system you're in, either Photoshop and then Preferences, or Edit and Preferences. And I'm on a Mac, so let's take a look at that really quickly. So you can see Preferences here, and I'm going to click on Cursors. And you'll see that you have painting cursors. You can do normal brush tip, which shows you that. Precise would just give you crosshairs, but this will show you what the size of your brush is. So I'm going to click OK with that. So here in the brush tool, it basically does what you think it does. It paints. So if I come up here, here are the options for the paintbrush tool. I'm going to, and you have different brushes here. Now, some of these are sensitive to being on a pressure pad, so if you had like a tablet or something that recognized pressure, so those aren't as really useful for you if you do not have one. But these are the main ones that use sort of standard brushes. This one has a really hard edge. You can see the hardness is 100%. This one, the hardness is 0. And let's show you what the two of those do. So if I use 100% hardness, I click, you see that it does a perfect size of the brush. If I come over here and do the one that's a softer brush, you'll notice that it has a much softer edge. Now, there's also some really useful stuff. You can change the size of the brush here, which can get a little cumbersome if you're doing a lot of brush work, like if you're doing digital painting, which I end up doing a lot of. One of the things you can do with that is there's keyboard shortcuts for almost everything in Photoshop. So for the paintbrush tool, this is what you use. So on the keyboard, there's the P key, and you'll see the square brackets. So if I tap the left square bracket, it gets smaller. If I keep pressing the right square bracket, it gets larger. So it's a really useful thing if you're doing a fair amount of painting. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off and show you some of the stuff that a paintbrush will do. So I've got this soft brush. Now let's look at here at the options. So I can do blending modes, and we'll get into layer modes and blending modes a bit, but this one does it specifically with the brush. I don't like using that so much with the brush because each layer mode has its own blending mode, and so I can paint and then figure out how I want to do that. And it has a much different effect depending on the blending mode. Now I've got a white background, so there's not a whole lot of stuff you see in there, but that is an option for the brush. The biggest ones that you'll be using are flow and opacity. Now, flow, they end up, depending on what you're doing, have slightly different effects. The one that I use mostly is the opacity. So if you change the opacity, you'll notice that it's much lighter. See how, and then this will build up. So if I keep clicking and I go over top of it, it continues to build up. But I can also go full. So I'm going to take this small down, and you can do things like, you don't know, write your signature. Now with a mouse, it's a little difficult, but it does do lots of great things. Now, I'm going to show you one other effect. So I'm going to create a new layer here. And being on a new layer usually helps us. So I can go back and I can take this layer and I can create new ones, as many as I need, brush on. And I can also, if I don't like this, I can, this little eyeball again, I can turn it off, or I can delete it because I didn't like what I did with that. So here's my new layer. And I'm going to go ahead and fill it. So I'm going to use the paint bucket tool and fill it with black. And then I'm going to create a layer on top of that to paint on. And if I do that nice soft brush that we have right there, you can see it there, and I take this opacity down to say 30% or so, somewhere around there, and now I got a black color here, so I'm going to go ahead and pick something, go back to that sort of pink color we had. If I slowly build that up, you'll notice that I can get some interesting things building off a black background or off a white background, and it does some really interesting textural stuff. Alright, so those are the basics of the paint tool, the brush tool. We'll be using those for other tools as we go along, but play around, have fun.